Did you know the phases of the moon and planets can actually impact how your garden grows? It's true. And it kind of blows me away. It can influence how long our cut flowers last, and even how our carrots and potatoes store throughout the winter, depending on when we harvest them. One of my favorite tools is using a planting calendar. And one of my favorite planting calendars is a celestial calendar. Rosemary, Tayler, and Kathryn Aunger, who are the creators and brilliant minds behind the celestial calendar, joined me in a conversation to help walk us through how to use a planting calendar for when to plant seeds, when to harvest. It's really, really powerful. And it's one of my favorite tools to use. I'm Natalie Forsbauer, founder and editor-in-chief of Heart and Soil magazine. Be sure to subscribe to our channel, like the videos, and share them. It really helps them get seen by other people. And if you haven't grabbed a subscription to Heart and Soil magazine yet, hop on over to heartandsoilmagazine.com and grab yours for just $39.99 a year. Enjoy the conversation and make yourself an amazing day. Thank you so much for joining me for this conversation, Rosemary and Kathryn. It's a delight to be connecting with you in this way.
We're happy.
It's good to meet you.
We're happy to share our enthusiasm about planting calendars and our own particular one, the celestial planting calendar, Natalie.
Well, I love the celestial planting calendar, as you know, and I would love to hear about what inspired you to create the calendar and how did you get started?
It's always a lifetime of work that leads up to a certain event. I've got a background in homeopathy and writing, and even a little bit of publishing. And Kathryn, what's your background?
So I've worked for about 30 years for major corporations, and I've done desktop publishing, web design, all that kind of stuff. So my contribution to the calendar is all the graphics and the color and the artwork that goes into it. And Rosemary is absolutely phenomenal at pulling together the artists and the articles that are featured in the calendar each year.
It all began with our backgrounds, but one of the trigger points was around 2009. That was 3 years after you bought your farm, Kathryn, with your son.
That's right.
And that is about 9 years into working as a community garden compost volunteer. So I was up to my knees every summer in piles of compost from 109 plots. So it was a lot of compost. And it was my sort of retirement plan that I took this course in biodynamics in 2009. And that's how we met. That's at amazing. That course. And the course was over 9 months. So it was a protracted time that we got to create bonding and relationship. And lo and behold, about 4 years at the most later, Kathryn and I ended up teaching the course. Wow. One of our students reached out and asked about creating a planting calendar. And he pitched it to us. We were teachers, and the teacher became the student, as it were. And Caesar asked if we would produce a planting calendar, and we looked at each other. I can remember us looking at each other and say, "Well, sure, that's easy." So we did. And so 8 years later now, we have the Earth Haven Learning Center. And we've published other books, but our main specialty is the planting calendar.
And I love your planting calendar. I love everything about it: the images, the stories, the writing, the easy to follow color themes that you have throughout when to plant what. And yeah, I love everything about it.
We'll go into the color side. Go ahead, Kath.
When we first started doing the planting calendar, there's a number of other planting calendars out on the markets, and we asked our students what they wanted, and the number one thing that they wanted was the color coding, because it made everything so easy to understand.
Yeah, it does. I literally carry mine around with me. I won't say half the time I can't find it. Sometimes I actually can't find it because I carry it around with me because it's so valuable. I actually take it out to the barn and to the field and sit with it on my at my kitchen table or on the couch or wherever it is. So it is a traveling calendar in our house.
Yeah, when I sell, I see all the orders that come in for calendars, and a lot of people will buy a number of them. So they'll either have one in the house and then one out in the barn or one in the garden shed or something like that. Yeah, so they always have one in multiple places.
I'm going to graduate to that. I was thinking about that this year. So that's what I'm going to do this year. Thank you for that.
So my sort of non-scientific side of my life is to balance the art and the artistic style, the poetry, the wise words, and just the size of the pictures. And I like to balance the artistic side with the science side. We'll go down that rabbit hole about the colors and the days of the week and all that in a minute or so. But I think we as left brain and right brain individuals have to use them both. So we're very fussy about artists and we're always looking for another artist.
That's so cool. How would you like to show us the calendar and how it works?
Let's start with that picture that you can put up on your screen.
Yeah, I will bring it up.
I need to even begin by acknowledging, sure, Kathryn and I started this particular calendar, but a wonderful researcher in Germany whose name is Maria Thun, her father studied with Rudolf Steiner. And I don't know if the story goes quite like this, but he didn't tell her much. So she wanted to make sure and discover what they were talking about was really true. And so she devoted about 50 years of her life researching, planting seeds, measuring how they grew at different times of the month or the year. And she did all that research. And then out of that, she created the first planting calendar that was a biodynamic planting calendar. Of course, planting by the moon has been around since ancient times. The indigenous people still work with planting just before the full moon, and new moon is always a good time to start things. But the biodynamic aspect of a planting calendar was initiated by Maria Thun. We follow her style and her concepts, basic principles. And that's how we set it up.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for giving us the backstory because it's really, really powerful. And I love that. I love her dedication and curiosity to it. And I am just going to share this screen. Tell us about what's in front of us on the screen.
Well, we can start in a linear way, or we can just jump in with both feet. I like to jump in by looking at the moon phases. The dark is a new moon. So right at the top of the page, that first row is all black. So there's a new moon there. And interestingly, on the left side, I think it's your left and my left, on the left side, there's a pair of earphones sticking up. And that is a representative of the moon's path crossing the sun's path. And it's called the North Node. And twice a month, every 27 days, actually, the moon comes down through the sun's path and it goes up through the sun's path as the moon spins around Earth. And so what's interesting about this particular frame and that particular line is that the earphones are coinciding with a new moon. And when there's that alignment, my best guess, without knowing which month or day that is that there's an eclipse that occurs there. So we're starting that particular month with an eclipse of the sun, because the sun is hidden behind the moon.
Wow.
And so this alignment of the moon's path crossing the sun right at the same time the moon is actually crossing the sun's path is ominous and considered a sacred time. Now, if you notice further along that line, it's red, and then it goes into a gray zone. So if it were a real eclipse, there would be 24 hours of no working on the garden because it's too sensitive. There's too much, I want to call it chaotic, but there's too much cosmic energy coming through those forces during an eclipse. So we put the gray area to signify that it's a waiting time rather than a working time. Now that we can see that the little glyph beside that new moon is one with horns on it. That's Aries, and it's red. So Aries is a fire sign. That was the one significant conclusion that Maria Thun made, is that there's earth, air, fire, and water signs, water constellations. And that's been around since the Greek times. And Maria found that when a fruit is planted on a fire day, it seems to do better. And so that's been her teaching, and that's what we have followed. The next red area is a Dipsy Doodle design that is actually Leo. And so it's for three full days almost that the moon passes in front of the constellation Leo. And again, it's a fire sign. So it's a perfect time to plant strawberries, harvest strawberries, mulch your apple trees, prune your apple trees, all of those fruit-oriented activities in the garden. Kathryn, you want to jump in?
So then when the moon is in the green, that's your root signs. So you have your Capricorn and Virgo and
Taurus.
Yeah. And so those are the best times to be working with your root crops, which would be garlic and potatoes and anything that is in the ground. These are also good times to work with anything to do with the soil around the ground, like an earth thing. So here on Earth Haven Farm, we would be adding manure on an earth day as well. Turning the compost on an earth day is good tasks to do.
Some people claim that anything that you do on an earth day is always good.
Yes.
Yes, I did. I think I actually read that or learned that somewhere. Yeah.
The Gemini sign are those two twins that's below the Taurus sign, and it's yellow. And air is the element for Gemini, Libra, and one more, Aquarius. So flower or a flower day, basically. So planting sunflowers, if one harvests those flowers for resale at a market, it's best to do it on a flower day. The flowers last longer, and the flower, when it is planted, is more hardy and prolific. So that's the flower story.
Mm-hmm. One of the other things that we get asked quite often when we're at events and talking about the calendar is how come there is like 3 or 4 days to work with a root crop, and then there's only 2 days to work with an air sign, or 2 days to work with a water sign here, and then 3 days to work with a water sign later on in the chart. And that has to do with the length of time it takes the moon to cross in front of that particular constellation. And some of the constellations are bigger or longer, if you want to call it, than the next one in line. Right,
Yeah.
Rosemary?
Exactly. Let's find a small one. The Cancer it only has 2 blue lines at the near the top, and so it's a very small sign. And Leo is likes to spread itself way out across the sky, and so it's a larger constellation. It takes up more room, and so it takes longer to pass through. It takes about 3 days for the moon to pass through Leo. Each degree that the moon moves across the sky takes about 2 hours. It's a rough rule of thumb. And so some are longer and some are shorter. There's Scorpio. Now, Scorpio's all colored in, and it's a perigee, and there's a lot of gray out area there. We didn't talk about perigee. So let's just go down to that right. One that says PG on the far left, Natalie. It says PG. That's right. There's a column that says AG and PG. And perigee is an astronomical term that refers to the moon coming closer to the Earth. The moon's path is elliptical. It's not exactly round. It's more a little flatter. And so every 27 days, the moon comes in a little closer. And because it comes in a little closer, it creates a stronger gravitational field. And it's wiser not to push the garden too far when there's that strong gravitational fields. The tides are higher. There's just more energy from the moon. And so Maria Thun advises it, and our other teachers, including Hugh Courtney in Virginia, who was one of our mentors, that perigee time is a time of waiting. Yeah. AG, that other abbreviation is for apogee, and apogee is when the moon is much farther away from the Earth, and so it doesn't have that strong gravitational forces. But it is a good time to harvest your potatoes because there's less water in the plants because the moon is so far away, and accordingly the potatoes can be stored longer when they're a little dried out. So that's another something to keep in mind. So have we explained enough of this, or do you want more?
Yeah, that's really fascinating. When I was farming and when I was out in Chilliwack next to my parents' farm, I grew dahlias, and I didn't follow the planting calendar for harvesting them. I just harvested them when I could. And I had huge success with them making it through the winter. And a lot of people have their dahlias rot on them. And 1 year I lost almost I had, it's not an exaggeration to say thousands of pounds of dahlia tubers. And I lost almost all of them. I ended up with maybe like 45 or 100 tubers in total. And I noticed that they were really wet. So I harvested them after a massive rain. And I'm also curious if I harvested them when they actually holding more water, which would have made them perhaps more vulnerable to decomposing. Mm-hmm. It's fascinating.
Yeah. Yep. So what else? We've got those colors that are on the second column. They're sort of a milky brown and a yellowy brown. You'll notice that if you look beside that column, go 2 columns over, and you'll see Gemini, the under where it says zodiac, moon in zodiac. Mm-hmm. You'll notice that the column changes with the moon pointing down when the moon is in Gemini. And then if you look all the way down, you'll see that the color changes That's right there. You'll see that the color changes and the moon starts to point up.
Mm-hmm.
And the old people's term is the moon running low and the moon running high. And just like the sun is higher in the sky in the summertime, when the sun is in Gemini, and then it starts to go down from midsummer solstice, the sun is decreasing in the sky. And then in the midwinter, it's at its lowest point when the sun is in Sagittarius. So that happens once a year on Earth year, but the moon goes through that cycle once every 27 days because it's spinning around faster in relation to how we see it. So the moon is descending in Gemini, and it goes on through Cancer, Leo, Virgo, and Libra, and Scorpio. And then after that, the moon starts to go slightly higher in the sky. It's almost imperceptible, but if you watch very closely and you compare it to where the trees are in the sky, you'll see that sometimes the moon is high up and sometimes it's down low. This is a very, this is indicative of the time for transplanting is when the energy is going down, and the time for harvesting is when the energy is going up, because you want that energy up in the sap rising, or the goodness of the flower, for example, if you're cutting flowers, you want all that goodness captured. And so when the moon is rising, as opposed to when it's descending, it's a subtle, all of these are very subtle changes. But from a beginner point of view, I myself included, work with the color scheme and check for the gray out areas. That's the short of it.
I love that, Rosemary. That's where I started too, is with the color scheme, and then the adding and learning more about the other stuff as I've been going. It's so powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything else, Kathryn, from your side? Well, let's show them the front cover of our new calendar. Can we do that?
So this is our 2022 calendar. There we go.
And we have a theme of Earth consciousness. So, Natalie, you had asked us what our biggest hope was for those who use the calendar.
Yeah.
And basically, we do this out of a labor of love. It's not a big financial money-making scheme by any chance, but we do it from a labor of love. And we're hoping that those who work with our calendar will catch that energy of being conscious of what they're doing and do it from a place of respect for the land and how they're participating, how they're co-creating with the soil and the plants that they are growing. I find that people really respond to the need. They don't know where to start. You know, they've got to do mulch the garden, weed the garden, transplant. They have so many things. They don't know where to begin. And so by focusing in on the fire signs or the fruit crop for a day or two, and then the root crop for a day or two, and then the flower crop for a day or two, it gives them a sense of focus and direction. As long as they come from a place of love, they can do whatever they want and still enjoy what they're doing. That's the most important part.
Oh, that's really powerful, Rosemary. Kathryn, did you have something to add to that?
No, I mean, here on our farm, we use the calendar, and we have a lot of interns that come and work on our farm. And one of the things that we like to promote is that when you come and you spend a whole season here on the farm, you really get to see the whole picture. And that's where I see when we start to do the seeds We start to put them in the greenhouse and we start to do our seed saving, and then we're transplanting it. And when we do it by the calendar and then we get to the harvest time, the same person gets to see the benefits of working with the calendar, that my goodness, this stuff is just like perfect when it comes out of the ground, right? And then at the same time, sometimes we're pressured and we just have to put things in the ground, and they're going, but we should be doing, and we go, well, we have to get it in the ground. And then when we harvest it, again, they get to see, well, we didn't do it quite right. And this is what you get. So it's a whole learning experience to be able to work with the calendar and see the benefits of doing it by the calendar and what happens when you don't do it by the calendar. And I'm the person that fills a lot of the orders, and I'm just ecstatic every year when I see, oh, you ordered it this year and you ordered it again, you know, and I just got a call from a lady today, and this is her 6th year ordering from us, and having that dialogue with her is like, you know, I can't do without my calendar, right? Yeah. And then I hear from first time people is like, oh, so-and-so recommended your calendar and I'm going to try it. And I'm going, yes, give it a try.
Yeah, so exciting. I'm so glad you spoke to what happens when you don't get the strawberries planted on a strawberry day or harvested on a strawberry day, and you just move ahead and do it. You do to the best of your ability.
I can give you a backup plan if you can't plant the strawberries on a strawberry day. Strawberries are fire or fruit. And so the backup plan is that you can work on a flower day. The yellows, red and yellow go together. Fire and air are more at the cosmic realm, and water and earth are more at the earthly realm. And so you can flip back and forth and do one if you can't do the other.
Oh, that's awesome. And what about, where do we find out what are the fire, earth, and air planting schemes? How do we know what falls into
that's the key thing. It's like, okay, so here's the thing. So if you wanted echinacea, for instance, echinacea is, we typically know it as a flower, but all different parts of the echinacea can be used for different things. So if you are wanting to grow echinacea to harvest the root, then you want to be propagating or working with the root on a root day. If you're working with echinacea for the powers that are in the flower part of it, then you want to be working with it on a flower day. So it's up to you to decide what you want those plants for. Now, on the farm here, we started doing a lot of seed saving. So for instance, we might be planting, what's one? Say garlic, for instance, which is a root crop, but we want to propagate the seed part of the garlic. Well, we'll actually plant X number of them on a root day and then X number of them on a seed day, so that those plants we grow for seed. And we do that for radishes. Radishes is another root one, but if we want to propagate a certain radish for seed, we would do it on a seed or fruit day.
That's awesome. And may I ask you another question in regards to the garlic? I'm wondering, you said planting it for seed. So I know you can take the top of the garlic for seed and plant that. So are you talking about using that part for seed? Or are you even talking about using the clove for seed as well?
The clove for the flower, it would be the flower part.
The flower part, okay.
Yeah. Good to know. Which would be the same thing for anything. So again, the radish is a root crop. So you're propagating that root the same as, other ones. But the radish will actually go very, very quickly to seed. Another one is lettuce. Well, we'll also plant a lot of lettuce, but we also let X number of them go to seed so that we can harvest those seeds and save them for next year for seed saving. So you'd put maybe 5 or 6 plants in on a seed day. Yeah. And then they will propagate a very, very strong seed. So you, as a farmer, as a gardener, you have to do that thought process. What is the end result? What do I want to really hone in this plant?
great living questions to sit with as a farmer and
Yeah,
gardener.
so it's not rock, it's not cut in stone, you know, and it's all trial and error, and like everything in biodynamics and Maria too, do your own experiments, you know.
Yeah.
You write down your own little diary as to what you did, when you did it, and the results.
The calendar is not just from a beginner point of view. We do have information for advanced knowledge about working with biodynamic preparations, for example. And so we've learned these skills from our mentors, including Hugh Courtney, and we present that very advanced information as well. It helps to have training and background or some learning of some sort in biodynamics, but it's not just a basic planting calendar, it's also a biodynamic one.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning that, Rosemary. It's super profound. I know people who've been farming biodynamically for decades who use your calendar.
You'll see here, we're the only calendar actually that I know of in the world that actually gives recommendations for when to apply your biodynamic preparations. And that's based on the recommendations of Maria Toon and Hugh Courtney and the other mentors that we have worked with, like Rosemary says. Yeah.
That's amazing. That actually was one of my favorite parts of your calendar, as it was my first time using biodynamic preparations all by myself on my own farm. So because before I was farming with my brothers and my dad, and they kind of drove that part, even though I was super interested in it, they were the ones who were doing the applying and that type of thing. So it was really helpful. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Well, is there anything else you'd like to add before we close up?
No, I think we've covered everything, unless there's any more questions. Rosemary?
Can't think of anything. Just the people are sometimes afraid to take first steps into gardening. And possibly this calendar gives them that sense of confidence, or maybe the confidence comes from the plant itself. But either way, working within the rhythms of nature is really very fulfilling and satisfying. The person actually feels like, well, I did it. And so that sense of confidence and inner confidence is part of what the calendar can bring.
Yeah, it's so powerful, whether a person is just learning for the very first time or they're deepening into their journey as a farmer or gardener. So thank you very much for the resource. It's one of my favorites. My family's been using it for a really long time, and it's always been hanging on our walls. And I've been really feeling blessed to have had it as a tool to use on my farm here for the last 2 years. And I love and I'm very honored to be a part of the 2022 calendar. So thank you for inviting my voice into that.
The only little glitchy thing, Natalie, it's always good to talk about the glitchy stuff, is that our calendar is for Eastern Standard Time or Eastern Daylight Time. And so one has to subtract an hour or 2 hours in Saskatchewan, or add an hour for New Brunswick and Nova Scotia. But that goes right down to the Panama Canal, so those time zones. So there is that little glitchy thing.
Oh, I'm glad you mentioned that, because it's super helpful. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Yeah, so thank you very much for your time today, Kathryn and Rosemary. I appreciate you. And I look forward to hopefully getting to visit Earth Haven one day out in Ontario. It sounds like a beautiful oasis of learning and inspiration and delicious food and community.
We'd love to have you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for your time. And people can find the calendar at
www.earthhavenlearning.ca.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Big love, and you make yourself an amazing day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Grateful you joined us for that conversation and interview. If you haven't subscribed to Heart and Soil Magazine yet, head over to heartandsoilmagazine.com, click on that subscribe button, and join us for just $39.99 a year. You make yourself an amazing day, and I'm really grateful you're part of our community.